The reason that you and I are not sitting in the capital city of this nation right now is due to an agreement made at a secret meeting between three of the framers of the United States. In the summer of 1790, James Madison and Alexander Hamilton were invited to dine at the residence of Thomas Jefferson, where behind closed doors they struck a vital compromise. The South would get the capital city, which became D.C., and Hamilton, then Secretary of the Treasury, would get his dream, the right for federal government to assume the state debts. And though no one else was in the room where it happened, from that moment, Hamilton came to be seen as the father of the American economy and responsible for the country's ability to become a global military superpower. And his key, if counterintuitive, insight was that debt is good. To be indebted to a lender makes that lender invested in my success, and once dependability is attested and loans are punctually refunded with interest, more lenders will contend for a stake in the benefits of my commercial success. Thus, in what was called the Funding Act of 1790, Hamilton commenced the first federal debt and set the most powerful market in history in motion. But of course, while debt can indeed breed bonds of common gain, if too heavy, it can break a borrower, precipitate default, trigger hostility, and fan the flames of war. And beyond the world of nations, interpersonal debt offers the same promise and peril, which brings us to a revolutionary regulation legislated by Moshe that we read this morning. Now, in the event Moshe says that a lender finds a borrower unable to repay their debts, the former is eligible to collect some collateral as a pledge or indemnity to protect their investment. But a series of strict limitations stops the lender from robbing the borrower of their ability to live. First, essential utensils must be left in the hands of the borrower. Lo yachbol rechayim, one may not take a millstone as a deposit, ki nefesh hu chovel, because that would be akin to seizing a person's soul. Second, the needy must not be left to sleep in the cold. Im ish anihu, if the person borrowing is destitute, hashev tashiv lo et ha'avot, you have to return the collateral to him, kavo hashemesh, until dawn, v'shachaf b'sam lato, so that he can sleep beneath a blanket. And lastly, when coming to claim the collateral, the lender must never, ever enter the borrower's home. In Moshe's words, ki tasher b'reacha mashat me'umah. If you make a loan of anything to your neighbor, lo tavo al beito la'avot avoto, you shall not enter his home to claim the collateral. B'chutz ta'amot, stand outside, and the person to whom you loaned will bring the deposit out of their home to you. Now I can understand how a miller's millstone is like a smith's hammer or a coder's computer, and impounding it is akin of stripping them of the ability to live. And I understand how pressing a debtor to spend a night in the cold may well risk their safety and endanger their life. But why, when collecting collateral, must a bailiff or a lender be made to wait outside? How does this law, keeping dispossessors outdoors, secure a borrower's well-being or protect the welfare of the poor? They are getting the collateral in the end. And there are two brief answers to that question that I'd like to share with you today, starting with the Ottoman-born 16th century mystic, Rabbi Moshe al-Sheikh. And for him, this ban on entering a borrower's home has nothing to do with protecting the poor or shielding the weak, but speaks solely to the person who wields power. It is an injunction to remind the lender of the big picture, and says in his words, Al ya'aleh al ruchacha, do not imagine for a moment, ki yesh lecha alav chov, that you truly have a debt over the borrower. Ki la Hashem hakesef v'zahav, because gold and silver belong to God. Accumulating credit, says the Al-Sheikh, may give the lender an outside sense of influence. It may give the lender the compelling impression that they hold sway or may dictate the affairs of those who owe them money. And to some degree, society relies on the mercantile hierarchies of the market economy. It depends on lenders repossessing assets in lieu of overdue debts. If we are to keep the peace and preserve the public trust, accounts must be balanced, pledges must be kept, and commitments cannot be broken without fiscal consequence. But at the core of a sacred society, says the Al-Sheikh, lies a nationwide awareness that we are all indebted to heaven. Though in every free society some will have more means and others will feel more need, every single citizen, no matter their class or their caste, must share a sense of profound dependence on divine benevolence, a sense that the affluent may well forget. So the Ashech says, Lo tavo al beito, you shall not enter the borrower's home, because though they may owe you money, we all owe God so much more. But there is a second reading of this injunction, one that goes to the core of civic norms and contemporary law and positions our supreme prophet once more at the epicenter of a humanizing shift that transformed moral history. For a catalogue of commentators from the Chizkuni and Rabbeinu Bachya to the Torah Tamima and Chief Rabbi Hertz, it is the spirit of this seemingly modest and inconsequential regulation that inspired John Locke, among the other architects of Western civic freedoms, to claim that we each have an inalienable right not only to life and to liberty, but to private property. Now, it is true that when Thomas Jefferson scripted the Declaration of Independence in a country that seemed filled with empty space, he chose to replace private property with the more poetic and apparently pertinent triad of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But the legal guarantee to private property appears all over the Constitution, and it is a guarantee that goes back formally to a 16th century English jurist called Sir Edward Coke, who coined a phrase known by every student of British history: a man's house is his castle. And it was that sentiment that nation-states have no lawful place in a safe private home the British Prime Minister William Pitt later evoked in a speech so significant that it was cited in a case by the Supreme Court of the United States. He said, "The poorest man may in his cottage bid defiance to all the forces of the crown. It may be frail, its roof may shake, the storm may enter, the rain may enter, but the King of England cannot." And it was our supreme prophet who first said in the sacred text that we read this morning that everybody's house is their castle. No matter how much debt a borrower may owe, if they do not pose a threat, lo tavo al beito, no one may enter their home. And the focus of the inviolability, almost holiness, of the private home emerges from a whole host of neighboring laws, including those excluding citizens from war. If a man gets married, he is not to fight on the front, but is to stay at home, nakiye, leveto. And if a man dedicates a new house, he is not to fight on the front, but is to stay at home. Yelech v'yashov, leveto. Moshe taught law by law that despite the fact that we as a people ought to treat each other like family, the private home is a sacred haven from the public square. It is a personal space in which we can retreat from the stress and tension of the streets, reflect on and address our own needs, and invest time in defining our own dreams. It is a space in which we can remove the masks which guard us in the world at large and carve out an authentic sense of self. Secure homes yield sincere souls and serve as the sturdiest foundation for a strong and bonded nation. When our greatest king begged God to let him build the temple, heaven rejected his bid. But he is given a single consolation. Natan the prophet tells King David that God will not let him build the temple, but vayit ya'aseh, he will make for you a home. A home is a safe harbor from the waves that rocks the sea of society. It is a place to raise families, nurture faith, and bathe the mind in the balm of uninterrupted introspection. It is a private place to stay temptation and train the will to remain committed through good and ill, through all the ups and downs of life outside, without which it is near impossible for human beings to truly thrive. And this is why Moshe teaches our people that no matter how many wars we wage, no matter how much a person owes, the foundation of a strong and enduring nation is an inflexible respect for each person's private home. The home is a sacred haven that gives us space to breathe and brace for the mission that we have all been given, to lean on our faith and heal the world. May we all find ways to harness the gift of private space, to reflect on our faith and embrace our charge to face the world. I wish you all a Shavua Tov.